Welcome to the Harmony Principle podcast. Today, our special guest is Dr. Alicia Powers. So excited to have you here today, Dr. Alicia.
I'm
Dr.
happy to
Alicia
be here.
Powers, yes, is a data scientist and wellness educator who helps high achieving women break free from the wired and tired cycle. With a PhD from Carnegie Mellon and training in both statistics and herbalism, she creates personalized, shame free approaches to reclaim steady energy and nervous system balance. Through her Sugar Slowdown program, the Ultra U app, she helps women decode the patterns, keeping them out of balance. So happy to have you here today, Dr. Alicia. How
I'm
are
happy to be
you?
here. You can call me Alicia, and that's fine.
Alicia, that's
Yeah.
right. I the Alicia Keys things. I kept telling
Yeah.
myself that all night and going, no, it's Alyssa, it's Alyssa, it's
Yeah, according to my mom, my name officially is Alicia, but I
uh,
like I told you, I feel like Alicia Keys, once she came out, people call me Alicia, so it's
just
fine. Either
ruined
one
it
is
all for you.
fine. But the doctor's
So
not required. Yeah.
okay. Well, Miss Alicia, so happy to have you with us. And so early in the morning for you, I truly appreciate it. You getting out here and joining us today. So you do so many wonderful things, and I'm so excited to learn more about them. So, what made you decide you wanted to become a data scientist out of all the wonderful things you could do in this world?
Oh, that's a really interesting question for a couple reasons. It's partly because I'm a gigantic nerd, and I think my love of numbers and just patterns and is just how I really came to it. But the practical side is when I went to college, undergrad, I was studying cognitive science, which is the study of like psychology and sociology and different aspects. And I got on the phone with my mom and she said, nobody knows what cognitive science is. You'll never get a job. You're good at math. Do something with math. And so I explored getting a degree in statistics and I loved it. I love describing the world with numbers, which that's what statistics is for me. And over my career, the role has changed from statistician to now data scientist, and it'll probably move to AI something at some point. But it really, at its core, it's really about understanding, yeah, describing the world with numbers. And I think I love it.
I love that. I love that your mom was like, you like numbers, like focus on that.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And so then, this journey that you've been on with your own health and how that led you to what you do today, would you like to share more with us about that?
Yeah, I have been struggling with my weight, but also wellness in general, in a way that I didn't understand. And it's been through probably the past 5 years that I really started to use my data science lens to look at health and wellness. And I find that it's working. And I think one of the reasons is really honoring my own journey as opposed to what everyone else has experienced and learned about wellness in general. And so Core Harmonic is absolutely designed to really focus on understanding your own individual patterns, your own individual health and wellness, and then doing what's best for you. And that can look like a lot of different things for people.
Nice. And I love how you look into the patterns with that because I see how that's so very important when you have all of these conflicting information coming in from everywhere. Do keto, do this, do that, go vegan. And everybody's always confused, like none of this is working for me. Why doesn't any of it work? Or what diet should I be on? Or what exercise should I be on? And I'm like, we're all individuals, guys. It doesn't work that way. There's no one perfect
Exactly.
diet. Perfect diet is the one that works for you, the one that you follow, and the one that makes you feel healthy, alive, and energized. So I
Exactly.
love that you're able to break that down. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works with your process?
Yeah, I think it really is about recognizing people's humanity, right? So there's the science of anything or the data of it. So yes, keto diet can absolutely produce results under certain conditions. There's science to wellness and health, but there's also a huge psychological, I call the human component of this. world that we're living in, where a lot of decision making. And so I think what we see in the health and wellness space more often than not is a scientific approach. We know that on average, if you do these three things or you do these four things, this is the outcome you're expected to have. But that actually may not work for people who are not like the representative sample that they use to do the study. And I think myself, I often refer to myself as a persistent outlier because I'm too short. I weigh too much. I'm too this. I'm not enough this. And when you are stepping outside of what has happened in that scientific arena, you may not be able to get the same results. So then you really do have to shift over to a place of understanding what's going on with you and what works with you. And I think it's maybe a struggle for most people because our culture hasn't really championed the individual within the wellness space. When it comes to kind of medications and things like that, we kind of use a scientific approach. But I think as we understand that our world is complicated, it's so clear that we're going to need individual understanding of people's bodies to really serve them and make sure that they are moving towards wellness.
Yeah, definitely. I love how you talked about not being part of that representative sample because I also fall in that being super short myself. So after having kids, and then you're like, okay, I had these kids and now I want to lose that baby weight. And you go to the diet app and it's like, reduce your calories by 500. And it's like, okay, that's like 900 calories a day. Let's do it. It's like, no, that doesn't, you can't survive off of that, no matter how small you
No.
are. That's not reasonable. So yeah, those things are really just set off of a sample base, usually a male, for one thing,
Nice.
and usually a regular size male, which discounts someone like me that's like under 5 feet. So, so yeah, I love that you take that into consideration.
And some of those experiments are short-lived. They're not, it's very expensive and time-consuming to do long-term studies, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So some of the recommendations you find, especially in the weight loss space, are short-term studies. And lifestyle is different than doing something short-term. And so for a lot of people, it's really discovering how to make changes in a way that are lasting. And what I find in my work, and then even in my personal experience, is extreme restriction can sometimes lead to kind of going overboard when things aren't working. So there is maybe a science, but I also think there's a kind of human part of wellness that says that requires some grace and also some recognition that we are human. And I tell my clients a lot that the focus is not on being perfect. The focus is very much on uh, making the recovery time from what some people term as mistakes or problematic behavior, making you getting back on track faster. And so that's a lot of what the practice is about, or a lot of the work that I do is I use data to help you understand when you're kind of going in a path that doesn't lead to your best wellness outcomes. And once you discover, wait, I'm a little bit off track, then we try to do things to help get you on track faster. Yeah, so that turns out to be the goal, not be perfect. That's not the
Mm.
goal.
Yes, yes, that perfection. What do they say? Perfection is the enemy of joy, or something like that. Um,
If people don't say that, I think people could say that for sure.
Something like that. But yeah, definitely knowing that you have to have some grace and some ease with yourself. So with your Ultra U and your processes, is there something embedded in there that kind of helps people um, say, okay, I had this slip up. I ate a whole box of Entenmann's, as the commercial used to ask, who ate all the Entenmann's?
Right.
And now what do I do and how do I talk to myself and make myself okay with this and ready to continue on.
I think part of it starts at the very beginning. So with Ultra U, the program's designed to have people track what's going on in their lives for 7 days. That's all. Even though 7 days is it's a short amount of time, but it does take some energy and some time to track. And so I ask people to track many things as much as they're willing to track. But we're really concerned about like when they're eating, where they're eating, who they're eating with, the five W's and the H, how they're eating. Are they eating fast? Are they eating slow? Um, I also ask them to track their activities, and I also ask them to track symptoms or and treatments that they do with the symptoms. Depending on where people are starting, I may have them focus on specific metrics. And in those 7 days, we start to understand and decode what patterns they already have, what exists. I think one of the struggles people have with wellness is they are ready to adopt someone else's um, system or protocol without knowing where they're starting. And this is going to get back to the nerd math person in me. When you're trying to solve a problem, where you start is very important to determining where you end. And so one of the things I focus on with Ultra U is really making sure we're starting at a point that makes sense for you. Excuse me. So, for example, I worked with someone who was very concerned about their blood pressure, and they felt like it had to do with their food. And so, first, we tracked for 7 days. And according to the data, her blood pressure was related to her watching MSNBC and CNN. It wasn't really the food that was associated with the spikes, right? And so I always make it clear, and I will make it clear here, I am not a medical doctor. I am not a nutritionist. I am not going to try and diagnose anyone or tell anyone what medication to take or not take. I do study herbalism, so I do use that knowledge in my work, which has a lot to do with body systems and how plants can impact those systems. But my focus is really the data, your lived experience, and how we extract patterns from that experience to help inform what to do next. And so if I look at 7 days and we kind of make hypotheses about what's going on with you and we don't see the data go with it, then we have other questions to ask. And that person did pull back on the news cycle and found that her blood pressure measures were much better. I find all kinds of things like food sensitivities, that people, they'll come in and say, I'm having these energy dips. I don't understand. I don't know why. For one person, it was the milk and the dairy. Every time they had, a certain amount of dairy, the energy levels are dropping. And so I ask people to really find and describe their baseline. Um, and that has been really helpful for people to decide what the next step is. A lot of the work I do is very much small steps that are accessible because I work with people who are busy, that have a lot of things going on, and also people who are not trying to change their whole entire lives, thinking it's going to get all these great results when really they're looking for sustainable energies, sustainable results, and really solving problems that may have been chronic. And so the goal is not so much having a very strong protocol per se, but finding those small steps that make the big difference. I want to say one more thing about that. People try to heal things before the body is ready to heal. And what I mean by that is if you have been mistreating your body for a long time, I'm well acquainted with this space. Um, it takes a little time for your body to recognize that you are eating well or that that walk is making a difference. It sometimes doesn't feel so great to make those changes. And so my goal is to allow people to make small changes, start to feel better. And when you start to feel better, it makes it way easier to get to that next step. A lot of times we try to do all the things at once. I'm very guilty of this all the time. Um, but we can't, and our brains aren't trying to do all the things at once. If we can focus on one or two things, solidify those, feel better, then it's way easier to take the next step.
I love that. Definitely small steps, a little bit at a time, and easing into it and letting your body respond and letting it have time. Like You definitely have to speak with clients and with ourselves even that, hey, I didn't get here in one night. So
Right.
why do I think I can get out of here in one night? Like it's the same trip, just like if you took a flight somewhere, the flight took however many hours to get there. You can't get back now in 2 hours or 1 hour when it took you 20. So
Exactly.
feel the same way with our bodies. And I love how you were saying that people are trying to heal things before the body is ready. And that I think a lot also about how when we're sick and we get a fever or something like that, we always want to suppress the fever, get rid of the fever because we don't like that. But it's like the fever is actually trying to do the work. And so
Absolutely.
sometimes it might not feel good as our body's trying to do the work, but we have to let it. So like, it's really good that you recognize that. And that story with the lady realizing that the TV cycle was boosting her blood pressure, that is just amazing to me. I love that you were able to actually track that and find it with your app because it's something that we talk about with people. We talk about the nervous system, we talk about stress, we talk about meditation and yoga and the benefits of all these things to calm your body down and be able to, change how your body responds. But to be able to actually see it and track it is a whole nother thing. So
This
I
is why
really
I'm a
love
data
that.
nerd. Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely. If you are asking the right questions at the right time, you can really learn a lot that can help you make better decisions. That's been consistent throughout my career. I've done it more in the nonprofit space or for-profit companies, but it works for individuals too, because it really comes down to the decisions that you're making.
Yeah. And so when we talk about like the high achieving women that we work with and the sugar patterns that are
Yeah.
going on with them, what is it that you're seeing where they're winding up kind of in that wired and tired cycle?
Yes. So there's the infamous, 3 p.m. crash, sugar crash that people know about, right? This idea that at 3 o'clock you just want to take a nap. And sometimes that comes from people choosing a high sugar breakfast and having that crash later. I see a lot with women the binge and restrict cycle where people will have a lot of sugar and then they were like, oh, I've been, bad or I've done the wrong thing. So for the next day, I'm going to restrict. Sometimes they restrict sugar, but sometimes they restrict everything. And so their body goes on this weird cycle of having a lot and then not having anything, then having a lot, and that's a serious roller coaster. And then I see people who experience stress or a difficult emotion, and sugar is the response. I mean, it's just an almost automatic response to that emotion, and it's, consistent. And sometimes they're aware of it, and sometimes they're not aware of it. And so those are the things that I see. I want to go back and say the reason why I focused on sugar, and it took me a little while to realize this, is that sugar is the number one thing any person can do to improve their health, reducing their sugar. There are a lot of people out there that say you shouldn't have sugar at all, or that, all Americans are sugar addicts, or I mean, there's a whole lore about sugar and how evil it is and all those things. And I don't really get into that conversation. My point is even 2 teaspoons less of sugar improves your health, period, point blank. And so for high achieving women who are using lots of things to cope with their lives, sugar is usually one of them. And so those conversations look like if we can remove part of this, part of your sugar experience, do you feel better? And what would you use that energy for? So I did work with a woman who's a mother who has a child that's trying to be a high level player, a tennis player. And so she's out in the cold watching play tennis. Like she has an extreme schedule in addition to being a mother, in addition to her business, because she's working with her son. And one of the ways that she was coping was sodas, Dr. Pepper. It was a lot of liquid sugar that was going in her body. Um, and so other things were happening too, but when it came down to what's the change, it's not a keto diet. It's let's get rid of the soda first and see how you feel. And she's off soda and feels much better. And after that happened, there were other steps that she made to kind of make her life easier for herself. So sugar is the last place to start for most people. But I also argue that the skills that you need to reduce your sugar are skills that you can use throughout your life and that everyone needs them because sugar is not great for the immune system. I recently gave a talk to a community and I said, if you're going to have surgery, you should try not to have sugar before your surgery. And one woman did that. She stopped eating sugar and she's like, I had no idea how much it was impacting my mood and my feeling. And she's like, I did recover well. She was having eye surgery. So she did one. She's like, I did recover well. I felt better. And so I'm going to do it for the other surgery when they do the other eye. And she really felt very positive and like her body was able to heal faster, which is consistent with the science.
Yeah, that's so important. Sugar definitely is key. I know when I first started my health coaching, that was one of the main things that they taught us to help people with was kicking the sugar habit, as I like to say. And the whole thing about Americans, we use way too much sugar.
It's a
I must
lot.
agree. If you travel and you go outside the US and you eat a dessert, it's totally different in some places. It can be very mild, but still so flavorful. And like you come back to the US and you have the sugar, and it's like, oh, it's like it's almost too much. Like it zaps you because you've been, kind of detoxing. So I love that you say even just 2 teaspoons less of sugar. So think of that, guys. If you can get 2 teaspoons of sugar out of your diet, how that can affect your energy levels and things like that. That 3 p.m. crash, that was what led me to health coaching. Actually, was
Really?
because I was having such bad energy and issues with that, and I finally, eventually, someone told me to look into adrenal fatigue,
Yeah.
and that was one of the ways they described adrenal fatigue. And it was like, oh, and at 3 p.m., you want to go to sleep. And then you at 10 o'clock at night, you're wired and ready to go. And it's like, yeah, yeah, that's my life.
Yes, that is the
um,
cycle.
yeah, so figuring that out really was what led me to this work and to wanting to help other women. So I love that you also were paying attention to how that's tracked and correlated with breakfast
Mhm.
and having a healthy, quote unquote, breakfast, having some protein and some fat can totally change your energy levels throughout the day. And that makes me think I'd also like to ask you. So I know that a lot of people were all on top of the keto coffee breakfast thing. Does that help? Are you seeing anything in any of your data? Do you have anybody that's done the keto coffee or any kind of coffee in the morning? Are you seeing where there's caffeine that's doing this or that in different bodies?
Yes, one thing I learned very quickly is people do not want to give up their coffee ever. Coffee is a mainstay. So a lot of the discussions I have are what's going into your coffee, how much sugar is going into your coffee, what kind of creamers are you using, because a lot of those creamers are very high sugar. So coffee, what I've seen is coffee is a diuretic, which means that it can help you eliminate water from your body. And so what I see a lot of times is people drinking a fair amount of coffee, but not drinking water. And one of the things we track in Sugar Slowdown, and actually it's one of the first things I ask people to really keep track of is their water intake. And so the coffee itself, there are patterns to when people choose to have coffee. But I really see more people, coffee drinkers, also being people who don't drink enough water. And once that water intake gets, more stabilized, they generally feel better. But people like their coffee. And that's a discussion that usually goes nowhere. I have much more success with, convincing people to remove soda. But again, the coffee people rely on, um, if it works for them, it works for them. But I do find it's the sugary, either the sugar that they're actually putting in, or sometimes they're putting in artificial sweeteners that we find don't really react well with their body. And it's the high sugar creamers that people really enjoy. One client I worked with talked about her frou-frou drink that she gets from Starbucks. And those are, high sugar content and so that was a conversation that was had. But, in the data, I haven't seen anything that says, don't drink coffee. What mostly I see is the sugar in the coffee seems to make people feel a little way because once we remove the sugar and replace it with something else, people tend to feel pretty good. or at least stabilize their energy a bit.
Awesome, awesome. That's good to know because I know people do definitely love their coffee.
Mhm.
I do have some cleanses and things that I take people through that they get rid of it just for a little while, not necessarily forever, for a little while though, and maybe even replace it if they want to with like a chicory drink, things like
Yeah.
that that are kind of like coffee. But yeah, I don't know what the data is on it because I'm not a data scientist.
I think again, coming back to the data science of it all, it's really what happens and works for you. So for some people, depending on their makeup, how their brain is work, how they're raised, or their ancestry, coffee can work beautifully. I am a person who coffee just causes my brain to, I hate how I feel on coffee. I feel jittery. I feel, like too much is going on. For my nervous system, it does not work at all. But I know people who absolutely will have that cup of coffee and everything just calms down and they're relaxed. So the data science is really about tracking the patterns within the individual person and not, I do comparisons and things like that, but a lot of it is really what is working for you. And so that's where I bring the data in. So I don't, yeah, it's not like a one size fits all coffee is good or bad. It's very much how does it impact you? And I say that mostly because we are in a very complex world. So I was born in the 70s, and I remember a time where, there were only three television stations and food was much simpler that we had maybe at most maybe 20 different cereals that you could choose from. There weren't as many types of cheeses. I mean, food generally was local when I was a kid. So I grew up in Arizona, so we didn't have access to a lot of fruits and vegetables year round. Things were very seasonal. So we ate differently, and you only could have certain things. Now we live in a time where you could be exposed to lots of different chemicals, different anything, because there's just so many products out there. There's so many things happening. And that's one reason why I champion this idea of kind of individual science, because your unique environment and context is going to be different than someone else's. And if you don't take those things into account, you can't use kind of general recommendations to work for everyone. That's something that is kind of the foundation of core harmonic is thinking about ancestry and where you come from, because even those things impact your diet and how you react to diet. I think there are a lot of stories I know personally of people who grew up in other countries and grew up on other diets and then came to America and experienced lots of issues because our food system's very different. And so keeping those ideas in mind of like where you come from, what you grew up on, what feels familiar, what doesn't, can really help you kind of decode what your body, what really will support your body.
That's a really, really interesting, the whole concept of where you come from and what your body's used to or your ancestors are used to. And I'm wondering, is there anything within your app and within your research and working with people that takes into account other external factors? I know we talked about the TV and things like that, but sunlight exposure, I'm assuming you're looking at sleep patterns. Uh, what other kinds of things are we
Yeah.
looking into beyond food?
Sure. So if people allow, because again, I work with people who have a lot going on in their lives, but if they can take 7 days and really be mindful and track as much as they can, I ask them about their activities. So everything that you can think of, I have a very long list of potential check boxes. So activities like what people think, as standard, walking and running and swimming and those kinds of things. But I actually include things that are not as standard, like massages and touch and cuddles and sex is on the list, and people tell me about their sex life as well. Um, I also ask more detail about pain. A lot of times medical professionals treat pain as the same thing. My checklist has, I think, 20 different types of pain, throbbing, to allow people to really hone in on what they're experiencing, because those different pains are actually different types of signals. And so I ask people, I often put in the app, it's customizable, so I can put different things in there, is a 30-second body scan. So people can take a moment and really kind of get into their body and recognize where is the pain. So I ask people, where is the pain? And then I ask them to really talk about the type of pain they're experiencing so that we have more information to have that conversation. I find one thing that's difficult for people who have things like fibromyalgia or chronic symptoms to really understand the totality of their experience, because there's such a limitation of words that are used to describe what's going on that you don't get the nuance. You don't get it's hard to understand the different parts of what they're experiencing. And so if people who are in pain are very generous with trying to understand because they're in pain and they want it to go away. They want to understand more deeply what they can do. And we generally can get at some better understandings. So I ask for everything, not to be invasive or nosy, but to be, from a data standpoint, collecting the data that actually can drive really good decisions. And so if you just tell me you're in pain in your head, that's really not enough data for me to understand what's going on. There's so many different ways to have a headache. And there's a difference between migraine. One of the conversations I have a lot is the difference between tired and fatigue. So tired is something, if you rest, you'll feel better. Fatigue is I'm tired and it doesn't matter how much I'm resting, I can't move. That distinction alone absolutely leads you to two different paths on what might be helpful. And I think that's the conversation that needs to be had, because a fair number of people are frustrated with not getting results. And will consistently argue that a lot of times the people who are helping, and I include medical doctors in this space especially, they are not working with the information that makes it easier for them to get to the decisions that really can help you. And so that is also an underlying goal of Entre You, is to give people a way to kind of track their experience, that they can share it with these professionals that can use that information to get them closer to what they're looking to do. So it is my goal to use data in a way that really helps people get what they need. And I'm a nerd about it, and people are like, data's not sexy. Nobody cares about that part. And I get why they don't. But I'm so excited about it because without, if you're trying to solve a problem, if you don't have all the pieces in front of you, it's really hard to solve the puzzle. You just don't have all the pieces. Data is one of the missing pieces.
Yeah, I think we're moving into a world where data is king. So
Yeah.
you're right in the right place. The other people may just be a little behind on the wave, but data, all of the personalized rings and watches, and everybody's tracking everything, continuous glucose monitors. It's a lot. But I feel like what you're doing seems to be a lot simpler, especially with just the 7 days of tracking, and most people can fit that into their lives versus, having something stuck to you all the time and remembering to charge it and and then who has your data after
Yeah,
that? I don't know. And what are they doing with it?
exactly.
So, yeah, Ultra Use sounds like it's definitely going to be a very useful product moving forward. It's amazing now. And then you have some programs you were talking about that you do with the Ultra U. What's it called? Your sugar.
Sugar
Um,
Slowdown is the first program that I'm launching. It is designed to be super easy for people. It has a food log, but there's no requirement to actually put food in it. It just asks what meal you're having and whether or not you had sugar. There are places where you can put more information if you want to, but it's absolutely designed to focus on one thing, which is your sugar intake. And we track your water because that's super important consistently, but with sugar as well. And then there are other things you can log and track. I try to make it accessible to people, but the main part of the program at the very baseline, if you're starting at the very beginning, I'm just asking you to say when you're eating and whether or not sugar was involved, which the definition changes for individuals. I meet with everyone to really talk about what sugar means in their life because it can mean different things for different people. Um, but it's that simple. And then in the app, there are what I call adventures, things to try to see if they impact the way that you make decisions around sugar. So, for example, one of the adventures is wait 10 minutes before you have something with sugar. That's it. If you're going to have the sugar anyway, then 10 minutes shouldn't be a problem. But in that 10 minutes, some people will be like, I talk about neurodivergent people. For some neurodivergent people, 10 minutes is an eternity and they hate it. And all they can think about is the sugar. But then for some neurodivergent people, when you say wait 10 minutes, all of a sudden they're on to something else. They forget that they wanted to have sugar and it just goes away. So there are those kinds of experiments. Another one is walk 15 minutes after you've had sugar. See how that changes things. Excuse me. A lot of these practices come from science, but they're simple, low-hanging fruit things that you can do to get you in your body, get you to understand how you're feeling, and then allow you to make some decisions about it. And usually you find one or two things that really works for you. Yeah,
I love that. I love that. Waiting 10 minutes. Um, for some of us, just go have a conversation. Like,
yeah.
go call a friend instead and
Exactly. That can
do
be enough
something
to
like
shift
that.
you. Yeah. A lot
Yeah.
of a lot of sugar cravings and seeking are oftentimes about something else. And a lot of times in the work that I've seen, they're emotional things. They're
Mhm.
emotion someone's looking for connection, or they're looking to feel more safe, or they're looking for um just a boost of energy. And you can get a boost of energy by doing 10 squats. There are lots of solutions to the boost of energy, but we've just been really used to certain ways of coping. And I also feel like the way we're marketed to is part of that. The solution when you don't have energy is to get an energy bar or an energy drink. When those solutions aren't really great long-term choices.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned just doing a few squats as an energy boost because I think a lot of people think, oh, exercise, it's exhausting, it's tiring, and that's the last thing that comes to their mind when they want an energy boost. But it really does because it gets the cortisol going, it gets things going, and bam, now you've got some energy.
Yeah.
Um, so
I
yeah,
mean,
doing a
breathing
couple
is also
squats.
low-hanging fruit. A good,
Hmm.
getting some oxygen to your brain can help you really feel better and also start that energy. So there are a lot of just small things that people don't either know about or aren't part of their regular practice.
Yeah, great. We've got a couple of chats coming in. I
Oh,
just want to go ahead and share that with you. We've got Gigi in the room, and she's saying that she's loving this. It's really good. She says she knows something is up with her when she wants chips, a potato, bread, something in me is seeking comfort. Yes, for sure. Definitely. I think a lot of us can relate to that. You want the soft, doughy, sweet, like, what we call comfort foods.
mhm.
Um, I don't remember what it was. Oh, it was Potatoes Over Prozac. It was a book that came out
Really?
where it
Okay.
was showing how the potato, for some reason, helps us feel less depressed. So it's really interesting what kind of foods and things that we um, think of or cling to or go to and what properties are actually in them that sometimes do help us feel a certain way. I know I have a video here on the channel from a long time ago that I had found this article that broke down like if you were craving sweets,
Mhm.
to do this, or if you wanted chocolate, you were low in magnesium, if you
Yeah.
wanted, salty, and it had all these different things. It was a really great article, and um, I'm glad I shared it and recorded it because now if I go back to the page to see it on the website, it's not there anymore.
Oh,
But it's a really great reminder that our body does give us these signals and
absolutely.
symptoms for a reason. It's not just like, oh, I'm just craving sweets and I should just, no, you might actually need something. You might be a little deficient in some key vitamin or mineral. Or,
Mhm.
like we said, we might be just craving some comfort, some companionship. So,
Yeah.
really tuning into what our body's trying to tell us I think is important, and it seems like the app can help us with that. So,
Definitely, I have a lot of components about your feelings about things before and after you eat. I use the app and I discovered the connection between crunchy foods and anger or low-key frustration. If I get frustrated, I'm not great about expressing it verbally or even recognizing it sometimes, but I will eat like crunchy foods or popcorn or things that have that kind of feel. And I'm like, oh, I'm actually frustrated because in the app I'm like, how am I feeling? Then I look at what I'm eating, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Um, it is not part of our culture to spend a lot of time really assessing how we feel in our body or emotionally, even cognitively. That brain fog is a real thing, but people don't spend a lot of time understanding when it's happening or how it's happening. And like you said, these are all body signals. Your body is really trying to help you survive and thrive, not just stay alive, right? It is a thing where your body is really on your team. But sadly, in a lot of wellness work, there are, you're fighting, you're kind of, working against it. And it's really important to listen to it, honor it, and really have it involved in the changes that you're trying to make.
Yeah, definitely. And I meant to say when you were sharing about the program that anyone that's interested right now, of course, we're going to share this in the show notes, but you can go to it's
Yeah,
sugarslowdown.com. Is that correct?
sugarslowdown.com. Yeah.
Okay, great, great. Yeah, so that they can check that out if they're interested. Um, and then also we were kind of talking a little bit, we touched a bit on where people are from or ancestry and things like that, how you eat, how you're raised to eat also. Um, so that brings me to one of my favorite key concepts, which is generational health. So I'd
Yeah.
love to ask you, Alyssa, what does generational health mean to you?
I mean, it means so many things. Mostly, I look at people's food choices, and part of my intake is um, listing your favorite foods and the foods that you hate, because I think it tells you a lot about how you perceive food, whether you think food is good or bad. And a lot of those key favorite foods come from childhood and nostalgia. And this is a place where culture does matter. I also ask culture and ancestry, and I get a lot of times people say, I'm just black or I'm just white. I don't have a culture. I'm like, everyone has a culture. Everyone has a place that they come from, routines around food, choices that were made. And I think when we talk about kind of the generational aspect of nutrition, that's where you see it, how you grew up as a child and what you were exposed to and what was expected of you. For people who grew up overseas, it looks very different than people who grew up in the States. But also, if you grew up in the South, very different food traditions. Even when it comes to timing, or even sometimes what they call meals, can be very different. And so I ask those questions because one, when people are trying to change, sometimes rooting that change into what is familiar can be super helpful. And then I also feel like a lot of the old food traditions are are applicable now. So like one of the things I'm talking about in Sugar Slowdown is marrying that sugar with some kind of protein or fat so that your body has more on fiber to try and digest things not as quickly. So like if you're just doing pure sugar, your body's going to take that message and digest it very quickly. It goes straight into your blood. Not ideal. But if you pair it with some other things, it allows your body to digest it a little slower. It's not as much of a insulin hit, all of those things. So then when you think of the tradition of cookies and milk, there might be a reason why cookies have been paired with milk. There are a lot of these simple traditions that are in the food. People don't ask why, we have this with this. But the generations, I think, understood that. I think my grandmothers understood some of those food combinings and things that worked and things that didn't work. And so I think there's a lot of wealth in how people used to eat and why they ate the things that they did together.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, the cookies and milk, definitely. If we can lean into the smarter things that we've bought from our childhood and our ancestry, not the sugar water. That's
Right?
probably
Sugar
not a good
water,
idea.
the Kool-Aid, yeah. There's some things that were introduced, but those actually aren't super ancestral things. Like,
No, they're not.
and I
They're
think
not.
of how my grandmother ate. she used to say,
Mm.
because she raised five boys in, well, five boys and one girl, five children, during a time where, money wasn't tight. She was very specific about picking vegetables, making sure she got her values. And meat was part of it, but meat was not the entire part of the course. It just wasn't cost effective. A lot of vegetables cooked in a lot of creative ways. Um, I think when we go, in my case, because I was born in the 70s, my grandparents had a way of eating that was partly born out of necessity, but also was a lot healthier in a lot of ways. Um, because it was less processed food. It was things that came out of literally the garden on both of my grandparents' side. They all had gardens. They all grew and took great pride in what they grew. And the food just tasted great because they were putting their love into it and they were growing it. And so I think when I think about, ancestral or generational, and this isn't about like particular races or creeds or anything like that, or even religions, but those traditions within those rituals, there's a lot to be honored there. There's a lot that really speak to our humanity, and I think those things should definitely come back into people's experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny, a little caveat. I saw this video my kids sent to me of a young, I believe it was a young black male with his friends, like after church or something like that. And he was saying how he was going to his grandma's house for, I don't remember if it was tacos or enchiladas or something like that. And they're like, "You're not going to your grandma's house, you're going to your abuelita's house." And they were joking with him, and I was like, yeah, that's gonna be my grandkids. They're gonna be coming over for sushi, enchiladas, um, gumbo. It's going to be the whole mix because I was raised in, the California kind of area where you have everything from everywhere, and you're eating pho, you're eating sushi one day, you're having tacos the next day. So that culture there is kind of this mix of everything and anything goes. If it tastes good, we'll eat it.
Which is a
So
beautiful tradition. I
yeah.
mean, it's beautiful, and so many of those foods can be healing. Like pho is my go-to. I feel a little bit sick, and I will go get someone who makes traditional real pho that's been on the stove for a long time, and I feel great. There's so many, and that actually speaks to herbalism because there are a lot of herbs that have medicinal properties, a lot of ancestral traditions include that knowledge in their cooking. You may not know that you're adding this and that cinnamon, that clove, that star anise has these properties, but they're in there. A good pozole, I mean, a lot of the stews and the soups of a lot of traditions include herbs that have medicinal purposes. So there's a lot of um, really great healing that can happen in ancestral knowledge, and whether it's nutrition or when you eat or how you eat or all those things.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of Americans, we think we're just hamburgers and hot dogs, but we go so
No,
much further than that. So
they're
another
so,
question I'd
yeah,
love to ask you about, Alyssa, is when we were talking earlier, we've talked about some patterns and things like that. In my work, I work with people with their patterns and their natural rhythms around circadian rhythm and when they eat, like you were saying, is almost as important as what they're eating.
yeah.
And all of these different things, I try to help people find a harmony in their life. And so I was wondering, what does harmony mean to you, and why does it matter?
These days it's a little evasive because I'm trying to build a business. And sometimes I find myself excited enough to really put a lot of energy in one direction or not. But when things are harmonic, are based in harmony, my company is called Core Harmonic. And it has a lot to do with my history with music. And so I played violin when I was a kid, and it's one of my favorite things in the world to be in an orchestra and play a beautiful piece of music, and everything's kind of flowing, and you're in that moment, and it's just, you're hearing the sound, you're experiencing, you're part of it. And that's what I think of harmony and balance when you kind of you have, music in front of you, you have a guide, but you're still experiencing yourself. You have your own tone. The person next to me has their own instrument and their own tone, but we're all kind of going in the same direction, building something together. And so harmony at its best is me performing at my best next to the other person performing at their best across from the other person's performing, and we come together and we create this beautiful, wonderful music. And I think about wellness similarly. I think that how I'm feeling impacts the people I'm around, which impacts more people, which impacts more people. And I recognize the times that we're in and the difficulty that a lot of people are facing. And I often think, honestly, if people felt a little better in their bodies, if they were doing some of these things that we're facing may not have the intensity that a lot of people are experiencing. So I am a proponent for my own health and wellness, which is always a journey. I never say that I have it down or I'm feeling at peak. That is not the experience I'm having in this moment, but every day I try to do something that puts me closer. And right now, my main focus is getting on the yoga mat. So right now, harmony looks for me when I'm on the yoga mat.
Nice. I love that. Harmony on the yoga mat, and connecting with others. That's one of the things that I have always said is that healthy people are happy people. So if we can get more healthy people in the world, we'll have more happy
Yes,
people.
yes,
And make it
absolutely.
be more harmonious. So yeah, I love that. We didn't mention that your brand was it's Core Harmonics on Instagram that they can find
It
you.
is core harmonic on Instagram. Yeah.
Great, great. And
Yes.
again, like I said, we'll put all that in the show notes.
Great.
And we're coming to an end, but I'd like to ask you also what used to be true for you but isn't anymore?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I would say the times that we're living in are really challenging my understanding of systems and structure and why people make the choices that they make. And so, what used to be true is there were a lot of systems that I relied upon and believed in deeply that are being challenged in a way that I just never thought they could be challenged. And that knowledge is one, it's heavy, but it also has opened up in me a willingness to dream something better. I think sometimes when things leave your life, there's a grieving process, absolutely. But then, and this comes from herbalism training because nature is a wonderful teacher for understanding that things die and decay, and that death and decay feeds what comes next. And so, even when you feel like things are not what you're used to, or you want to hold on to things. What's true for me now is recognizing that some stuff I can't hold on to. It's just not going to be there anymore. But what can I use what is left or what I learned to build something better, to grow something different, to imagine something that really serves and has more harmony in it.
Nice, nice. I love that. Yeah. These are some very, very interesting times for sure. And we're all just trying to find our way
Right.
the best we can. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers today, as far as how to get in contact with you or how things work as we wrap up?
Yeah, no, I'd say you're going to put the information in the show notes. I just want to say thank you for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you do. I mean, we're so aligned in talking about the idea of really getting in harmony, really understanding those patterns. And I find that when I kind of nerd out. In medicine, kind of the cycle is symptom, give someone something, see what happens. And I think what you're honoring is what's true is that there's a pattern. It's not a one stop in the moment. You're talking about let's do something that changes for life. And I really resonate with that. And the math is great on that because, that's how a lot of things work in nature. That it's nothing is really straight line all the time. It's really honoring this pattern. So I just want to say thank you. I've had a great time. Love talking about this stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it because I know when I came across you, I was like, oh, I've got to talk to her because this sounds amazing. I love apps. I love data. I love tracking. I love digging in. As long as we don't go, overboard with it, but to each their
Right.
own. And I love that you have the space in there for people to track and do as much as they want and
Yeah.
share as much as they want. And I really hope that more people take you up on your offers and
Yeah.
get in there and learn more about their own personal health because a lot of us hand that off to our doctors or even coaches or trainers or nutritionists or whoever at some other
Right.
app. And we're not really learning for ourselves. And that's the thing that I really like to work with my clients on is learning yourself for yourself
Yeah.
so that as it does ebb and flow, like you're saying, that rhythm, you know how to change and go with it because none of us are still eating baby food, hopefully. We're all adults, we're eating adult food now, and the adult food we eat today is not the same adult food we ate when we were 20, and it's
Yeah.
going to keep changing.
Hmm.
Our sleep pattern's not the same as it was when we were a baby. Hopefully, hopefully we're getting somewhere between, 6 and 8 hours of sleep, preferably the 7 or 8. And
Right.
it's going to keep changing. So it's like remembering that we are not like stuck in stone, like these are the commandments of how you live life.
Hmm.
We are ever evolving beings, and I love that you're able to honor that and respect that we're individuals with the work that you do. So, again, thank you so much for being here today, Alyssa. Thank you to all of the viewers live and that catch us on the replay. I hope that you're all taken care of and feel complete. And again, if you have any questions for Alyssa or I, you'll know how to reach us in
Yeah.
the show notes. And we look forward to seeing you all again at the next Harmony Principle podcast.